Welcome back to another Datto Reads a Lightfall preview article video where today we're talking about abilities, not Strand. I will cover that in another video, sorry for missing it, but I didn't think Bungie was going to drop a trailer and an article, and then more articles, and then several more articles on it, so I promise I will have a video on that this week. Today is current day abilities. Bungie is going to be nerfing ability cooldowns in Lightfall. They basically have not touched ability cooldowns in a significant way for multiple years now, and with Light 3.0 subclasses making our ability spam even more ridiculous than it was before, it was time to take a step back, especially if PvP ever wants to go back to some semblance of normal. They want to get things back to where they were around the 30th anniversary patch, which I feel like people were saying generally was okay in terms of balance. I could be wrong there. Starting in Lightfall, Tier 10 stats in Discipline, Strength, and each class ability stat is going to get you the cooldowns of what Tier 8 is right now, more or less. So Tier 9 and 10, as we know it right now, are basically gone in Lightfall in terms of cooldowns. Each tier of stats is also going to give a smoother gain in cooldown reduction instead of spiking at higher levels, so more consistency there. However, with the mod changes in Lightfall, Bungie doesn't think this will be a big deal. Legendary Armor will have 3 type-specific mod slots, which is up from 2, and you'll be able to run all of those ability energy regenerating mods at the same time now, like Bomber, Ashes to Assets, Dynamo, etc. So this should hopefully counteract some of these adjustments, in addition to the fact that mods will be cheaper, and seasonal mods no longer need to be slotted in your armor. Dodge cooldowns are getting reduced. Bungie is reverting this cooldown change from patch 6.3.0.5 because they think these changes will feel fine without the increased cooldowns since stats are getting nerfed. Next, we got roaming supers. In PvE, roaming supers are not very good because the neutral game of some of the strongest builds in the game does enough where you don't need a roaming super at all. Bungie has taken note of this and are making some changes. One-off supers are going to have their maximum orbs of power generated decreased from 7 to 5, while roaming supers will go from 5 to 7, although Well, Ward, and Shadow Shots are unaffected. Also, Hammer of Soul, Daybreak, and Spectral Blades are getting their base cooldown reduced from 10 minutes 25 seconds to 9 minutes 16 seconds. Those supers were all in the longest tier of supers. Bungie also plans on making more changes to roaming supers down the road. This isn't the only thing that's going to happen for those of you who are like me and initially thought that this change was not going to do a darn thing. Let's get more specific now. This is not a full list of changes coming, but it represents a portion of the major changes coming. Ward of Dawn is getting a nerf in PvP. People who played a lot of Iron Banner Fortress are probably very relieved by this, even though there's no more Iron Banner this season. Ward is overperforming, and Bungie wants players to have more ways to dislodge a Titan from a ward outside of just burning their super. They are making wards easier to kill in PvP, reducing its health from 13,500 to 8,000, while retaining their strength in PvE, so PvE should not see any changes. Damage to wards has been standardized. All weapons will now do 1.5x damage to a ward instead of energy weapons doing 2.5x and kinetics just doing their normal damage. Armor of Light is also getting nerfed. Max health from 425 to now 300, no longer negates precision damage, but now gets Void Overshield's 50% PvE damage resistance. I did not see Thunder Crash nerfs coming for PvP reasons, but here we are. Bungie says high-level Crucible modes is mainly the issue, which I don't really play, so that's understandable. It's very difficult to escape a Thunder Crash, so they want to tone it down just a click. Flight time is now 4.5 seconds, it used to be 5 seconds. Descent now begins earlier in flight. Landing detonation size versus players reduced by 20%, and they reduced the size of the damaging volume around the player while in flight by 20%, but pushed it further forward in front of the player to make flyby disintegrations more intentional, which kind of seems like a buff to me outside of the 20% reduction, making it easier to do those drive-by kills now. Unchanged in PvE. Fists of Havoc are getting a 20% PvE damage buff. Still not sure that's going to be enough to use over T-Crash, but we will see. Spark of Resistance was evidently too strong in both PvE and PvP, so linger time after you're no longer surrounded has been reduced from 4 to 2 seconds, and the number of enemies needed to proc this effect is now 3, up from 2. Moving to Solar, Bungie is addressing 2 Warlock pain points, Phoenix Dive and Daybreak. Phoenix Dive has way too long of a cooldown to justify it compared to how strong Rift is, so they are buffing the cooldown. Base cooldown is now 55 seconds, it used to be 82. When Heat Rises is active, the restoration effect now lasts 3 seconds, up from 1, and while Daybreak is active, the dive cooldown is significantly reduced, and the maximum detonation damage is now 220, up from 80, which means you might be able to dive bomb someone and kill them. Daybreak is probably the worst super in the game right now in PvE, or very close to it. Super energy cost reduced from 10 to 6.5% per swing, and its damage was increased by 25%. Big. The biggest news of the article is probably that physics collision damage will no longer kill you. Whether you're flung against a wall by an enemy, or your idiot friend is launching you with a sword, or you're falling 500 feet, you should not die anymore from physics damage. You'll still be left at 1 HP, so it's very possible for a dreg to just walk up and sneeze on you and then you'll die, but it seems like physics deaths are going away. Fall damage will still kill in Lightfall, but that'll be made non-lethal in a mid-season update. Light subclasses are getting a bunch of new fragments added and updated to tie into Void Breaches and Solar Fire Sprites. Arc is also getting a couple of new ones, and I will now read them all. Spark of Instinct. When critically wounded, taking damage from nearby enemies emits a burst of damaging arc energy that jolts targets. This is like one of those Warmind Cell mods, but hopefully unlike that mod, it'll actually be good. Spark of Haste. You have greatly increased resilience, recovery, and mobility when sprinting. Fire Sprite, we went over what a Fire Sprite is in a previous video. Fire Sprites are created by a suite of new and existing solar fragments and grant grenade energy on pickup. Ember of Mercy. When you revive an ally, you and other nearby allies gain restoration, and picking up a Fire Sprite grants restoration. Ember of Resolve. Solar grenade final blows cure you. Ember of Tempering now creates a Fire Sprite on solar weapon kills while active in addition to its original effects. Ember of Combustion now creates a Fire Sprite on solar super defeats in addition to its original effects. And Ember of Searing now creates a Fire Sprite when defeating scorched targets in addition to its original effects. Void Breach, again, we talked about this earlier. Void Breaches are created by a selection of new and existing Void Fragments and grant class ability energy on pickup. Echo of Cessation. Finisher final blows create a burst of void damage that causes nearby enemies to become volatile, and defeating volatile targets creates a Void Breach. This sounds like Fellwinter's Helm, except it's volatile instead. Echo of Vigilance. Defeating a target when your shields are depleted grants you a temporary Void Overshield. Echo of Domineering now creates a Void Breach when defeating suppressed targets in addition to its original effects. Echo of Harvest now creates a Void Breach when defeating weakened targets with precision damage in addition to its original effects. Echo of Starvation now grants Devour on picking up a Void Breach in addition to its original effects. That is your ability update for Lightfall. Thoughts-wise, I am not really too surprised by most of this. Crucible is an ability spam nightmare. Currently, overshields everywhere. Every engagement has at least one grenade. It is definitely out of hand right now, but even in PvE, things are a bit too crazy right now. I don't think much will change in PvE with all the mods we're going to have access to and all the build crafting and whatnot, but I'm hoping this tones things down in PvP in a pretty significant way because it's just not fun to fight against. PvE-wise, this shouldn't be surprising to most people. I'm sure there's going to be people who are mad about it because there's people who are just mad at nerfs no matter what the reasoning is. But power creep was incredibly strong this year, and it was pretty obvious that it needed dialing back. I wasn't sure if that was actually going to happen at one point because we were just getting so many buffs. But as soon as Bungie did a couple of nerfs to restoration and all that kind of stuff, I figured more was coming down the pipeline. The ward nerfs, I think, are fine. It feels tough to judge it solely based on playing Iron Banner Fortress and not seeing how it is in just normal gameplay. So my current thoughts are just, yeah, good. I'm over it right now. I don't think you're going to find entire lobbies trying to shoot down a ward in generic PvP gameplay. Just don't see that happening. But This nerf is targeted towards certain control-based modes where you're actually going to see Ward of Dawn, like Zone Control Trials, Fortress, etc. So it makes sense. Seeing a Ward in Iron Banner and being able to do basically nothing about it felt pretty bad. Thunder Crash nerfs caught me by surprise, but the damage volume moving to the front seems like a nice buff for Titans trying to hit people in the air before they land. I know I've struggled with making that a consistent experience, so here's hoping it does make things a bit smoother there. Feels like a buff to kind of compensate. Fist of Havoc PvE damage buff, desperately needed it. Fist of Havoc is dog in PvE, especially with Arc Titans being the way that they are, and with Curus being a nice hot swap exotic. Daybreak getting some big buffs, love that for Warlocks. It was also dog in PvE, absolute dog. Now the Phoenix Dive buffs, I hesitate to say that it's going to be super scary in PvP, but the possibility is definitely there. There are some people who are going to learn the hell out of this ability, and they are going to be nightmarish to fight against. The physics damage changes feel like the end of an era. I'm definitely not going to miss getting flung into a wall, going a little too fast and dying. That was super annoying. But, you know, it does feel like a little part of the game just got ripped out. You know, I don't know. I think I'm going to miss it when I'm playing with Jez and Danielle because they die a lot to physics damage and it's funny. And now they won't. And that makes me sad. Outside of that context, though, this is probably for the best. New fragments. Echo of Vigilance. Defeating a target when your shields are depleted grants you a temporary void overshield. One-eyed masked Titans are frothing right now. I think this might get a little annoying depending on how temporary that overshield ends up being. If it doesn't affect PvP at all, then, you know, all right, whatever, I think it'll be fine. But PvP numbers, need that on this one. Need to see how annoying this is going to be. Ember of Resolve for Starfire Protocol Warlocks. Solar Grenade Final Blows cure you. That is a nice little thing for you. Enjoy that, assuming Starfire doesn't get any nerfs. Keep in mind that Fire Sprites are going to restore grenade energy and Void Breaches will restore class ability energy. They are not going to work exactly like Elemental Wells do right now. I saw some apprehension about this while making the recap. All in all, nothing here taking me by huge surprise other than the physics changes. Thunder Crash caught me off guard, but I don't think the nerfs are anything to cry about, and they seemingly affect PvP only. The new fragments look pretty good, or at least interesting. I'm interested to see if they end up doing anything to current builds. Overall, I'm just glad that Bungie is taking another pass at abilities, as things have just gotten out of control over the past year, and I would not like every single one of my PvP fights to start with a grenade, or for a Warlock to full combo me with every ability that they have, die, respawn, and then just get full comboed again. Sorry about no Strand video. It has been written. I'm just going to wait and see if I need to make a video on the TWAB, and if not, I will post the Strand video. If I do need to make a TWAB video, then Strand will probably be on Friday. Thank you for your patience on that. Thank you for watching this or listening to it, and I will see you tomorrow, next time, whatever.